Dia tak payah pakai mask eh?
Tak payah.
Tak payah? Okey.
Jangan risau. Dah sikit tadi lah. Hai. Wah, sulap.
What is nullify?
Yes, nullify. They try.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I have instructed Tan Sri Shafiee and my defence team to adduce additional evidence in the federal court with the intention to nullify the
Here is a very serious affidavit making allegations that Datuk Seri Najib never got a fair trial in the High Court. Now, the basis of the allegation is this. There are various, there are at least about three. One is in relation to, you remember that Justice Nazlan said that SRC was the baby of Datuk Seri Najib. He set it up. He in fact configured the kind of organizational structure for SRC, including governance structure. That implies as though he had something to do with the M&A of SRC in order to give himself the maximum power so that he can abuse SRC in a selfish manner and corrupt manner for his own advantage. That was the judgment. Okay? Now we have found out, and you'll be surprised by this, that the SRC was created and was devised by Malayan Banking Investment. They were employed by 1MDB to do the advisory research and to provide the full opinion. So, Malayan Banking conducted this research, and they did it through their subsidiary called Malayan Banking Investment, and their subsidiary called Bina Fikir. Now, what does this mean? It means, therefore, that Malayan Banking itself was responsible for the creation and the detailed governance structure of SRC, not Datuk Seri Najib. But more interesting than that is, we found out that Justice Nazlan was in Malayan Banking during the relevant period. All right? Now, he was at one stage, until he resigned, he was the General Counsel and Company Secretary for the whole group of Malayan Banking, which means he would have actual knowledge about how Malayan Banking was involved in the formation of SRC and the structuring of SRC, and therefore he could not have forgotten this. Which means when he was told to sit, to take over from Justice Sufyan, remember, Justice Sufyan was quite unceremoniously transferred. He should have told himself, I have something to do with SRC when I was in land banking. So he should have declared the interest and perhaps invite both parties to make a submission whether he should continue to hear the case or he should recuse. He did not do that. But what he did was, not only I use the word forgotten within inverted commas, about his exposure to SRC when he was in land banking, but he did the reverse opposite, namely, he made findings of fact against Datuk Seri Najib as though Datuk Seri Najib was responsible in the actual formation of SRC. That's number one. Number two, that is not the only, what I call it, conflict of interest. We also found that, you remember, the charges, some of the charges relate to this aspect, especially the abuse of process under Section 23, that Datuk Seri Najib received gratification of the 42 million because he aided in the guarantee and the facilitation of the 2 billion and the 2 billion loan from Co-op. Yeah, you remember this, yeah? Now, the word Co-op, the word 4 billion was in the charges. Now, it gives you the impression that the 42 million was a gratification Datuk Seri Najib would receive because he made SRC receive 4 billion. To begin with, it's quite a laughable amount, but we never realized that the prosecution and the investigation, as well as Justice Nazlan, never revealed the fact that this money, the 42 million, never came from Co-op, not 1 cent. The money came from the loan taken by a company called PPD, which is Putra Perdana Development. They took 140 million from land banking. Again, land banking. And we have evidence to show that this 140 million taken by by PPD was transmitted to SRC. Okay? And it is this money, if at all, forms the 42 million that was remitted into Datuk Seri's account without his knowledge of the sources of those money. So, for Justice Nazlan to write a judgment making all kinds of assumption that this is gratification for what he did in the 4 billion loan, forgetting rather conveniently about the $140 million loan that PPD took from Maybank and remitted it to SRC. That's a total conflict of interest. That is the instruction I received from Datuk Seri Najib, and we have filed that. That's ground number 2. That's not all. Ground number 3, you'll be quite surprised how uncomfortable is the closeness of that of Justice Nazlan to this entire 1MDB and SRC before he became the judge. There was a 6.12 billion syndicated loan taken by 1MDB in relation to the power project, Power Tech and Tanjung Energy acquisition. So 1MDB took this syndicated loan, and the syndication leader was Land Banking. The other bank took 2 billion, but Land Banking took 4.17 share of the loan. Now, this documentation we just received, we just discovered this because, as is the case with the other 2 issues, neither the prosecution nor the investigating agency nor Justice Nazlan declare so that we should know this. And we discovered that Justice Nazlan was highly involved not only in the processing of the loan, but more importantly, when the loan became sour in 2014, he was again involved in the recovery of the loan. And he made various suggestions and comments, and he would have passed judgment about 1MDB. Now, 1MDB is wholly owned by, MOF Incorporated. SRC was wholly owned by 1MDB. Then later on, SRC became wholly owned by MOF directly. So they are associated companies, common shareholder. It is impossible for Justice Nazlan or the investigating agency or the prosecution not to know this. So this conflict of interest is very critical, because if this is true, Justice Nazlan is a potential witness in the 1MDB case that is ongoing. And this document has been tendered in the 1MDB case recently through Azmi Tahir. Okay? So he's a witness, he's involved in the loan processing, he's involved in the 140 million to PPD, and he is certainly involved in the critical element of of SRC. Whether SRC was the brainchild of Datuk Seri Najib, or it was a brainchild of 1MDB, but processed by Maybank itself. All these point to Justice Nazlan. So there is a massive conflict of interest. Now you remember, before the start of the trial before Justice Nazlan, we had Justice Sophian. Justice Sophian was transferred within 24 hours. Yeah? And the rumor was apparently his brother was a division chairman and exco of Pahang, which is representing Barisan Nasional or UMNO, whatever the case may be. But you and I know, in law, what your brother does has got nothing to do with you. Okay? Nothing to do with you. Yet he was transferred because, we think he was transferred because there were rumors that this is a conflict of interest. So you imagine that and compare that to what I've just told you of the conflict that we have just produced and filed this evening against Justice Nazlan, against the prosecution, and as well as against what conduct the MACC has undertaken in not disclosing this to us. All right? So we think that this application is important. It ought to be heard first before even the appeal, whether very much earlier or almost near to the appeal, it doesn't matter, but it has got to be heard as a matter of urgency and as a matter of priority. Now, the reason why this is important is because if the federal court agrees with us, the trial becomes a nullity, because it is a breach of the rule against bias. Remember, a judge cannot be biased. That means if there was a real danger of bias, because the judge is equipped with knowledge about SRC, about 1MDB, and many other factors that I've just mentioned to you, he should not be hearing the case. He should have just declared, I'm not qualified. You remember recently there was a judge, I think the son of the former Chief Justice Arifin Zakaria, and the judge here was Arif Imran. He was given a task to hear a case involving 1MDB. And he called all of us in and he said, I can't hear this case because my former firm has acted in one or two matters, but not him. His former firm has acted for 1MDB and related companies. And therefore he said, I recuse myself. That is what a judge with integrity must do. Yeah? You must dispel any suspicion and you must ensure that not only justice is done, but justice must be seen to be done, which is very important. Okay? In his position as Counsel General and company secretary. Company secretary is not a company secretary. When you are a lawyer, you are counsel general. Company secretary is you undertake all legal work pertaining to the companies. Here he was counsel general for the whole group of Malayan Banking and also the head of corporate legal, legal services. So in the terms of office, the citation was he was to undertake the review of all legal documentation, legal matters pertaining to everything in the group. So he's deemed to know, and we think he's also got actual knowledge about the SRC creation, because it is Maybank Investment, and then Bina Fikir is another of their subsidiary. And then the 140 million taken by PPD from Maybank, and that is the money that went, 42 million went into Datuk Seri account. Never the 4 billion. So everybody pretended, a prosecution pretended, Justice Nazlan assumed he must have some relationship with the 4 billion. Remember I said that this is not a pathology of corruption because the 4 billion was disbursed almost 3 years earlier to the money of 42 million going into the Datuk Seri Najib account. It just doesn't make sense. When you have 4 billion, why you delay 3 years? You should just put in the money or even ahead of time. Okay? Is that clear?
Sir,
yes.
going down the road, because of justice is served for the truth, with new evidence being filed, do you see it appropriate for the federal court to push back the decision date of this?
To push back?
Hearing date.
You mean the hearing date?
Yeah.
Well, a few things can happen. What we have asked
My
is,
question was for justice to be served, do you think it will be pushed back?
push back meaning postpone that.
Postpone it.
Okay. We are saying you hear this application first. Once you hear this application, it depends on how the decision comes about. We think the decision ought to be that forget about the merits of the appeal. He never had a chance in the trial because the trial was unfair. Because the judge who presided over the case had massive conflict of interest in at least 3-4 areas. Massive conflict of interest. He was involved in Malayan banking over matters relating to SRC and one MDB. Remember, there is a very important case called Pinochet number 2. It is General Pinochet who was being requested to be extradited to Spain because of his crimes against humanity. He was, the House of Lords said, extradite him. Decision has been made. Then they discovered one of the 5 judges, Lord Hoffman, his wife was involved in a welfare work in a branch to an organization that is involved, actively involved in the request for extradition. Nothing more. She was doing welfare work, nothing to do with the application. But the House of Lords decided that gives the impression that there is a breach of the rule against bias. And they declared that that proceeding in the House of Lords was null and void. They reconstituted a fresh hearing with new judges to hear the case. So here what can happen is, either they can acquit and say this has gone very wrong, or they can say let's do a retrial before a different judge. So the appeal becomes unnecessary. That's how important is this application. Okay, there is a date on the 16th June for a case management before a judge in the High Court. Yes. Yes. Anything else? Well, we are doing it simultaneously. Okay? Because if the QC is admitted early, perhaps even in time for this, you may find the QC arguing this as well. It all depends. Yeah? Anything else? Well, I've been cleared 2 days ago. 2 days ago, my Sejatera says I'm back to blue. No more red. Okay? Yeah, negative. Because by the time I realized I had COVID, 5 days has passed without me knowing I had COVID. So, you know, the period is normally 7 days for you to be over. So I waited for another 4 days. I'm clear. Okay? All right. Thank you very much. Boleh.
Buka email dulu.
Okey. Oh, ini lebih senang daripada